The pitot tube and stall warning indicator. So in an aircraft, all aircraft have some sort of way of figuring out how to, or some way of displaying the airspeed of the aircraft. Obviously, we're not on the ground, so we can't rely on the wheels turning to indicate how fast we're moving. So we have to rely on something else. That other item is called the pitot tube. So let's switch to an outside view here. Okay, and if you look really carefully here, there is a small little tube that's hanging out on the side of the aircraft right here. Um, this little device right here. This is called a pitot tube, and all it is it's a hollow tube with a little tiny pipe going through here and into the panel there, and it feeds the airspeed indicator. So let's go back to our internal view here. This right here. So as air goes into the pitot tube, it drives our airspeed indicator and it moves that indicator up. So the faster we go through the air, the higher this needle shows, and it gives us a fairly accurate representation of how fast we're moving through the air. That's how the airspeed indicator works in the air. On the ground, it does the same thing. We don't have any kind of device on the wheels to tell us how fast we're going in miles per hour, but we rely on the airspeed indicator. Generally speaking, when you're on the ground, you're never going to see this move at all unless you're in really gusty conditions. But generally speaking, your airspeed indicator is not going to you're not going to be going fast enough to drive that when you're on the ground unless you're taking off or coming in for a landing. So the other item that we want to talk about is the stall warning indicator. So let's go again to the outside view. Let's actually try the free camera here and see if I can do this. Okay, so the stall warning tab is located right next to the pitot tube on most Cessnas. This is so there we've got our whoops, we've got our pitot tube right here. Let's zoom in a little bit more there. And right next to it, if you look on the leading edge of the wing here, we've got this little tiny tab. That is our stall warning tab. And what happens is this little tab moves up. It actually activates when there is insufficient lift on the wings. So in other words, we're going into a stall. What a stall means in an aircraft doesn't mean that the engine's stalling. It means that the wings are not producing sufficient lift. The wings are stalling. They're not producing sufficient lift to keep the aircraft at its current altitude. So the stall warning is just an indication for us in the cockpit that the aircraft is getting close to a stall. You'll hear it in an aircraft. It's kind of a little horn you'll hear occasionally, especially when you come in for a landing. You'll hear the little horn going off there. That's the indication that the aircraft is getting into a stall. Generally speaking, when you're flying, at a high altitude, we don't want to hear that horn. If our airspeed gets too slow, that's when we're most likely going to hear it, but not always. You could be in a really advanced, real aggressive turn, and we could still cause the aircraft or the wing to stall itself in a real aggressive turn there. So let's jump back into the cockpit here again. Okay, and here we can see on the airspeed indicator the ends. We've got the green arc here. We talked about this before in another lesson, but the bottom of the green arc is the point at which the aircraft would most likely stall. Right in there, right there. And then we've got the bottom of the white arc, which actually indicates the flap's extended stalling speed. When you get to the bottom of that white arc, right about there is where the aircraft would stall typically. Um, with the flaps extended, with the aircraft in a clean configuration, in other words, no flaps, gear up, things like that, the aircraft would stall close to this speed, which is about 47 knots here. And on the white arc, again, flaps out, that's going to be about 40 knots. So it's really important for us to have these things. Obviously, the pitot tube needs to be heated in case we run into ice and stuff like that. So if we go down to the bottom here, there's a switch right here. It's called pitot heat. And that pitot, when we turn that on, it heats the pitot tube that we saw on the outside of the aircraft. It also heats the stall warning tab on the outside there. That way, if we fly into ice or something like that, we can help prevent those things from seizing up, and then give the instruments from giving us wrong indications there. So pitot heat is very important anytime you fly in freezing conditions. I'd say like 4 degrees above freezing and below, and you have any kind of visible moisture, you should have that pitot heat that should be turned on, and you just leave it on until you're done with the flight. In the summer months, we generally don't use it very much unless you're flying at high altitudes. You generally don't need the pitot heat there, but anytime the outside air temperature dips close to freezing, you want to turn that on just to be on the safe side.